Gianni, thanks again for being with us today. You've just gotten back from Chile. What brought you to Chile? What did you see?
Chile is the world's largest producer of copper. So I went to Chile twice last year, and I went this year, and I did a lecture for the government at the Congreso del Futuro to talk about the future of energy and the electrification of that. Demand for copper should grow by about 50% in the next 25 years, and that has the best demand profile of any of the major commodities.
What about in Chile? What's the sentiment like there, politically and sort of as an investment destination?
Chile had an election, and Sebastián Piñera won, so they're going to go back to this sort of more of a pro-business government. He takes power on March 11th, and I would say the sentiment in general, I was in various parts of Chile, is very positive. I was there visiting a couple copper projects. I was there with 35 different investors and analysts, and I was in the Maricunga, which is the middle part of Chile, so it's more established in the north and the south. And Caspiche, which was purchased by Goldcorp, and it's combining with Casales now.
Interesting.
But I was looking at the stuff owned by the Lundin Group of companies. There is a prolific gold endowment with the copper, but in reality, they're copper mines that could be gold mines, but in reality, it's going to be gold that reports to the copper. They're copper mines. The people that were there on that trip had a very favorable impression. There is a tremendous new district being created there. Some of these projects straddle the border, so that's sort of this bipartisan cooperation that will happen between Argentina and Chile. Chile's a sponsor of PDAC this year. And my take is that this is going to become, this is the future, or one of the big future districts of copper gold mining in the world in the next 10, 20, 30 years. I was very impressed, and we visited NGQ's projects and Filo. Filo was a spin out from NGQ, which used to own 3 projects, and I had a very favorable feeling from that.
It's interesting that you say Goldcorp has taken an interest in a Chilean project. Why is a major gold miner looking at copper projects in Chile?
Where do you find that kind of a gold resource? Just to give people context, and people that have never heard of this area, the middle part of Chile, yes, it's copper, but there's 100 million ounces of gold between all these various deposits. I mean, we're within 40 kilometers. That's prolific. So I would think that a lot of the gold companies, you get a nice multiple on a gold reserve, but a lot of money's made with copper. So if you could have a copper gold project, it's a good place to be, and we see that trend happening now.
Well, Gianni, what's going on with you? Give our viewers an update on CopperBank and what's going on in your writing career.
So my book is going to be on audible.com coming up in the next month, in February. As far as CopperBank, it was hatched 3 years ago. It was a 5-year strategy waiting for the normalization of copper prices. Copper is now $3.20, $3.25 a pound. It would seem to me that the investor interest is there. A lot of people are knocking on the door. They want to know what's going on with our projects, how are we moving them forward. And then also the companies that are in, the more senior companies than we are, they're looking for future projects. It's very picked over. We have examples where management teams like CopperBank were looking in the bear market for 2 years. They came up empty. It's very picked over. So where is the future of copper mining? And if I just articulate the trend, because we spent $150 billion in the last cycle, didn't find that much, right? So now we're basically either it was bought out in the last cycle, or we're looking at what's going to be deeper, lower grade, maybe not those classic copper mining jurisdictions, and it's a function of what does it take to make this economic. On the LME, if you look at it on a ton basis, copper currently trades at $7,200 a ton. So if you have ore that's 1%, it's worth $72 for a ton. The future of copper is not 1%. It's 0.5% copper equivalent, or it's going to be 0.4 or 0.3 copper. That doesn't work. By the time you process, mine, pay the debt back, at $3.25 copper, you do not have, I don't have to even do a feasibility study. The economics just do not work. That ton of ore has to be worth something that's going to make it economic. Which tells us, if the first question is, do we need more copper? Yes, it's going to grow by 45-50% demand the next 25 years. Could we see a 5 in the front of a copper price in the next 2-3 years? That's where we're going.
It's interesting. We've seen since December, the copper price has taken a hit, but long term, the trend is running higher. So you think perhaps $5 per pound isn't out of the question in a few years?
Copper's taken a hit. I mean, it was $3.30, now it's $3.20. What's that? 2%? That can happen in a day. I believe copper is going to decouple from most other commodities just because the utility of it It comes from very few places. It's going to be lower grade. If it's a play, it has 3 acts, and each act has 5 seams. And if we go back to the year 2001, the all-time low in copper, we're now in Act 3 for sure. Probably Scene 1, maybe in Scene 2. We're starting to see this manifest itself, and I know this because I test the temperature of global investors. In the past 4 months, I was on 4 continents. I spoke at a lot of conferences. There's a lot of interest in copper. It hasn't quite manifested itself into maybe the lower hanging, the companies down the food chain, like CopperBank, but a lot of interest, a lot of knocking on the door, and as this plays out in the next sort of 24 to 36 months, I think it could surprise people. The old high, if we recall, for copper was about $4.54 a pound.
Yep.
Will we pass the old high? Let's see.
Well, Gianni, besides CopperBank, are there any other stocks that you like at this time?
I'll mention 2. So I've already talked about the Lundin group of companies that are in the Maricunga there. Ross Beatty has a company called Lumina Gold. It's a copper company. They've done a lot of interesting things. They doubled their resource. The stock didn't go anywhere. I mean, for relatively small money, that company was able to grow the asset base, and they have these other assets. It's in a southern Ecuador focus. So with Sol Gold, Lundin Gold, Ecuador's on the map again. So if people want to have, they like investing in gold, but they want a big copper kicker, look at Lundin Gold. I think that's a company that's going to do very well. Just look at the chart, it's spaced out for a while. And if you want to have the most exciting, home run drill play for next summer, that, in my opinion, is going to be done by Aston Bay. So it's Tom Ulrich and Dave Broughton, 2 years of science. They did a $2 million survey, and they have these high priority targets. And Dave Broughton, of course, was the one that worked with Robert Friedland, still does, and found the Kamoa-Kalua deposits in Congo.
Yep.
This is going to be a highly anticipated drill program, and they'll have a drill spinning there in July. Aston Bay trades around 15 cents. So if I was to give people a flyer, you want to look at Aston Bay. I think that's going to be, a lot of people are going to be following that drill program, me included.
Well, there we go. There's a few picks from you, Gianni. Thanks again for being with us today.
Thanks.